Hey, what's going on? My name is Tonga, and today I'm going to be going over my production or bringing my production down on one of the tracks that I did for Rocket League that came out back, I think, last March. So it'll be going over Windows Down and taking you through how I conceived it and how I arranged it and all that stuff. So let's just jump right in it. I started off with really a 3-chord idea, like a harmonic idea that I played on the Rhodes. And the chords are, I believe it's G minor, A minor to D minor 9. And then that actually is the entire song. It's a pretty simple harmonic thing. And what makes it interesting throughout the tune is I just do a different arrangement kind of choices to kind of open it up, as you'll see, and I'll go through. So after I got that chord progression, I started messing with some stuff. And so here, what I'm doing for the introduction is kind of like creeping in slow. Some tracks I like to come in like straight, hot out of the gates. But in this, I wanted to kind of creep in slow and then slam in later. So I have this pad, the Rhodes pad. And then I also have this continuous arpeggio, same chord voicings essentially, but I broke up the chord. So I'm playing a broken chord or arpeggio on top to give it momentum. And then I have this percussion kind of loop that I chopped up just to give it a little bit of push. And then halfway through, just to give it a little bit of movement, I change it up. Melody on top and some tonal percussion, as I call it. It's a synth. I'm using a patch from Diva. Essentially, I'm just using this as a percussive element more than a tonal element, like melodic, that you'll see with the drums a little bit later how it fits in. And the nice thing about this is, what really makes it the difference is not only adding in these 2 extra layers here and here, essentially, I took out the shaker, so it gives it a real change in definition. So right here, what I did next is I introduce the vocal line that happens to be like the melody or the true melody of the song to help with the transition. But then I chop up this drum fill or part of a loop to make a fill out of. It's one of my favorite things is to chop up drums. I like playing drum parts too, but I really like taking drum fills and making them my own. Like how I would play them. I get all the sounds from the drum fill or loop and then just rearrange it myself. So, which is pretty basic. I really like this type of drum fill. I call it like the red carpet approach in the sense of like I'm dropping the red carpet for the main part of the song to come in and really, it's like present itself. So. So in this section, you can see that I'm essentially playing the same thing. We have the momentum continuing on with the arpeggio on top, the pad, keeping it low. What I added to the pad was the bass. And I just have have it sidechained to a quarter note bass or a kick drum. I want to talk about really in this section is the drums. How I arrange the drums here. Nice kick. Just a good snare sound. I think I layered 2 different sounds to get this. But really the top side part, I originally had this. That was my main thing. I just used another shaker loop. Really pretty basic, straightforward. But I added my own 2 shakers and a tambourine that I recorded myself and it really opened up the palette on the high end, that just like that sonic palette up there. So what you get is it's busier, but it's still pretty transparent, but it's also wider. So it's technically like 3 shakers and then a tambourine. Keynote on the kicks, if you take a look here, it's basically 4 on the floor, but I like anticipate it by about an 1/8 note, just to give it a little bit more momentum, so it's not just a boring, like just, oops. It's not just like a fully boring 4 on the floor and like complete loop. Gives it a little bit of texture, or a little bit of a push. So now the Vox line, the melody, what I did here, I took an arcade vocal melody and just messed around with it. And what I did here is I doubled it and I chopped it up. But what I did here was I did octaves. I just took the same line and then I layered it, I doubled it, and then just pitch shifted it up. So I had like a texture of both the high and the low. I like that thickness rather than if I played it with just the high or just the low within everything. It would be, let me see what that sounds like. So just the high. Kind of nice, but I just wanted a little bit more presence in the melody. The way I arrange this too, I'm always trying to think of like internal dialogues, like within parts and parts talking amongst themselves, as well as within different parts of the arrangement. So drums and maybe the pads, they'll play something, and then some other part in the arrangement is responding. I'm always looking for moments like that, but I have this internal dialogue of just short and then a long response, short, long response, short. And so it gives it enough space, but enough movement, and that's like pleasing. So another thing I wanted to add was a tonal percussion type of thing to add to the drums. So you have the drums here, but I also like to, in some of my tracks, I like to replace, or I always split my drums into hi-hat, snare, kick. That's like your fundamental sound and group of sounds. Sometimes I like to switch out my hi-hat with, or like what I would perceive as a hi-hat, with something that's tonal, that's not a literal hi-hat, or something like a shaker or whatnot. So I maybe use a bell instead. But in this case, I would use this, kind of acts as a bell, or like a triangle, but like, or actually more of like a go-go bell is what I was going for. So adding that on top of the drums, let's get that. So it just adds another texture, but that's tonal. That's like a bit more tonal, and moves a little bit around, and makes the drums like move a bit and make it not like completely predictable. Like, all right, copy paste. Even though a lot of it, as you can see, is pretty much, you know, like the shaker is literally just duplicated. And I just did the same pattern all the way through here. So there's little bits and pieces, but it keeps it alive. So, and then again, going into the next section, I like to set it up with a fill. Oops. So the chords are still the same. What's the main difference here is I'm using I use diva a lot in here. I'm like punctuating the pad a bit more. So that already alone, like we have this Rhodes sound up top that's been basically like sustained, right? That's sidechained too, so it's a little bit, moving. But at this point, now the pads are more hits. They're sustained too, but it has more of like these punchy attitude. So I did that there throughout the entire section. So it's, that is the thing that separates it. You look at the drums. I added another loop, and what I did was I used a loop, drum loop from a buddy of mine in San Diego, his Dirty Money Breaks, Jake Nager, and I used one of them but I used an auto filter. So it's a great break. But it's too busy if I had like all of the full spectrum of the EQ in there. So what I did was like, well, I want that busyness, but I'll just take the top side of it. So I put an auto filter or an EQ, and I just chopped off the bottom part. So I'm left with an interesting texture that's hi-hat oriented, Everything else is the same down at the bottom. I still have this one shaker. I take out these. So again, adding stuff and pulling other stuff. Then also I have the guitar playing here, doubling the bass. I'm a huge fan of doubling a bass part with another instrument. My favorite instrument pairs I like with bass is like bass and guitar, like here, and also bass with left-hand piano. Like I'm a jazz musician as well, and that's one of my favorite sounds. The upright bass with the left-hand piano playing the exact same in unison, same bass line is just like a really like beautiful sound to me. But there's a lot of different things that you can kind of pair together. I do this in other tracks. You'll see this in another breakdown of another song. But anyways, there's another dialogue too, if you notice, between the pad and the bass line. A little break in the drums, just a surprise. And then at this halfway point, I am adding, you can see visually, I'm adding this. Nice texture. And then just a ride, just to give it some shimmer on the top. And then again, I did that red carpet approach with the red carpet approach. Just to help like transition this section. And added some guitar. Just to give it again, more of something to like, separate this part of the B section or middle section with the second part, give it somewhere to go. And here again, another transitions. Transitions are the best. I like to end my solos with, a nice handoff. A lot of times it's like kind of like a real calm handoff. Other times it'll be like high energy into just like really just letting go at the top of a solo. But I tend to like bring it back down. What I did here too, you also will hear, this is I believe it's a cowbell or just metallic sound. And all I did was just pitch it each just a little bit down, a little bit up, middle, then down and down, just to mimic what was going on in the guitar. Oops. Hands it right off. And now let me talk about this section. This is the coming out of the B section. I'm essentially doing the exact same thing as the A. So it's a callback to the A. This is my favorite production type of technique. I did this on a track that a remix that I did with my friend Alejandro. He did of mine, and then we worked on it together. And it's this kind of Hocket style drum break, I guess I would call it. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm taking the same pattern. If you see this, you see how I've deactivated the loops all across in different spots. And essentially what I'm doing is between all of these things, you can see how like sometimes some parts come in, other time, and then it trades off with another. And then it's just a timing thing of like, okay, something pops off at this point, and then it is responded with another part, but it keeps the momentum going. There's always something playing for the most part. Sometimes there's a full break. But again, we have the consistency of the pattern going up here. We have this part continuous. So that's our anchor point. While that's anchoring, we can go buck wild down here on the drums. So take a listen and pay attention to how the interaction between this synth, which is my like tonal percussion, and then all of the drums. And then even, I put this little delay kind of dub thing here. I even put this to kind of accentuate these pads to accentuate like some stuff, but check this out. So this makes this is the most interesting part of the song to me. All of these things just working together, giving some space, and just creating this Hocket style of like, oh, I'm going here. And then when something's empty, something else comes in or whatnot. Take a look at how different, if you look at the whole track, this is the kick. Up to this point, I have kicks basically 4 on the floor. And then this helps accentuate like the reality of like, oh, this is so different. This section is like very different. It's just the fact that the kick is not present on all 4 beats really opens this up. So that's another thing. I like to contrast my sections drastically whenever I get the chance, like as drastically as I can. Sometimes it's subtle. For example, from the A section to the B section, I just took this out and then put this in, different top on the percussion or whatnot, those sounds. But here, this is kind of like pulling the rug, and it makes everything on top really feel freer. So everything's kind of floating, grounds it every now and then. Whereas if I'm here, everything is completely grounded and everything is consistent. There's no pocket thing going on top of going on top. So transition, red carpet fill, and then here it's just at the end I'm just throwing in everything. I have this part, all the drums are essentially in with some little one shots to decorate and ornament it. A little bit of change in the vocal stuff. Then the way I end it, I didn't want it to end like very abruptly. I wanted to go out the way I came in. So I decided to strip it down to 2 parts, just this synth pad and then me just kind of playing piano over it, just to kind of bring it all, cool it down. So that's essentially it. Again, the biggest takeaways here, I would say, is knowing that it's like, I'm just using 3 chords. Sounds fancier. Like sometimes like a 3 chord, 2 chord, sometimes a 1 chord song sounds fancier than you realize until you like actually transcribe it or just figure out like, oh, it's only a couple of chords. When that's the case, know that for myself, like if I have less chords, I know my arrangement has to be much more interesting to keep the momentum going and the interest in what I'm, trying to deliver. So as you can see, I use a lot of different stylistic kind of techniques to achieve that. And this was super fun to make. I'm glad I did this breakdown to just kind of revisit, like, oh yeah, I forgot about that technique. So now I'm going to go write more stuff. So thanks for joining me. Click like, subscribe, bell notification to get more of these in the future. I have 5 tracks or anthems out in Rocket League right now, but I'll be going over all 5 of those as well as some other production tracks that I've been doing. Hopefully you got inspired, or you figured out something for your own tracks that you can still take some techniques from me and use them in your own tracks. Shoot me some comments down below and let me know which parts of the arrangement or techniques that I use that you use yourself or that were kind of new to you. All right. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.